The space station floated in the darkness between stars. It was so large that small ships looked like insects next to it. This was the Unified Species Academy, a place where the young minds from many alien worlds came to learn together. For hundreds of years, beings from across the galaxy had studied here. They learned science, diplomacy, and how to work with species very different from their own. Park stood at the window of his small room, looking out at the endless black sky. He was 22 years old, with short black hair and tired eyes. He had traveled for 3 months to reach this place. Earth was now just a memory, a blue dot somewhere far behind him. He was one of only 3 humans ever accepted into the Academy. Humanity had only discovered faster-than-light travel 15 years ago. To the rest of the galaxy, humans were newcomers, bobbies, and worse than that, they were predators. Had read the files. He knew what the other species thought of his kind. Humans had forward-facing eyes, designed to track prey. They sweated to cool their bodies during long chases. They could run for hours without stopping, following wounded animals until those animals collapsed from exhaustion. Their history was filled with wars, violence, and conquest. The galaxy was afraid of humans, and understood why. His door made a soft sound. His roommate was returning, turned to greet him and tried to smile, but he stopped himself. Smiling showed teeth. Showing teeth was a threat display to most species. The door opened and Vel entered. Vel was a being made of living crystal. His body was tall and thin, with sharp edges that caught the light. He had no face in the human sense, just smooth surfaces that vibrated when he spoke. Vel stopped when he saw, even without facial expressions, could sense the fear. The crystalline body hummed at a higher frequency. The edges seemed to sharpen. "Good evening," said quietly. He kept his voice soft. He had learned to do this. "Human," Vel replied. The word was flat, cold. They had been roommates for 5 days now. In that time, Vel had spoken perhaps 20 words to him. They slept on the far side of the room, as far from as possible. He left early and returned late. He never turned his back to the human. Did not blame him. Fear was not a choice. Fear was a response to danger, and to Vel was danger. The next morning learned that Vel had requested a room transfer. The Academy had it. When asked the housing administrator why, the administrator simply said it was policy, but saw something in the administrator's many eyes, something like curiosity, like observation. They were watching him, testing him, he was sure of it. The semester continued. Classes were difficult. The Academy used teaching methods designed for species with different brains. Some lessons were delivered through smells, others through vibrations in the floor. Struggled, but he did not complain. He sat in the back of every classroom. He spoke only when asked. He made himself small and quiet and harmless. It did not matter. The other students still avoided him. In the dining hall, tables would empty when he approached. In the corridors, beings would press themselves against walls to avoid passing too close. In group projects, he was always chosen last. His partners would communicate with each other but not with him, making decisions without his input. Ate his meals alone. He studied alone. He walked the station's long corridors alone, past windows showing stars he could not name. One night he called his grandmother back on Earth. Park was 87 years old. She had survived 3 wars. She had buried 2 husbands. She had raised after his parents died in a shuttle accident when he was 7. Her face appeared on his screen, wrinkled and warm. She was sitting in her garden. Even through the display, could see the roses behind her. "You look thin," she said. "Are you eating?" "The food is strange," he admitted, "but I am eating." "Are you making friends?" Hesitated. His grandmother saw the hesitation. "Ah," she said softly, "they are afraid of you." "Yes." "Then you must be patient. Fear takes time to heal. You cannot force trust. You can only offer it again and again until they are ready to accept." "What if they never accept?" His grandmother smiled. It was a sad smile full of old memories. Then you will have lost nothing, but you must try anyway. That is what makes us human, not the teeth, not the eyes, the trying. The announcement came 3 weeks into the semester. The first major challenge of the year would be the isolation chamber simulation. Students would be placed in randomized teams and dropped into a hostile environment. They would need to work together to survive. The simulation would last 7 days. Felt cold when he read the team assignments. Team 7, his team. There was a mantid from the collective. She had 4 arms and compound eyes that saw in every direction at once. Her species was known for cold logic. They did not feel emotions the way others did. Efficiency was their religion. There was a massive being from a prey species. He stood 3 meters tall and weighed more than 500 kilograms, but his eyes were soft and frightened. His people had been hunted for. They had evolved to fear everything. There was Kel, an amphibian covered in smooth blue skin. Kel was a telepath. He could sense emotions and sometimes read surface thoughts. When Kel looked at the amphibian flinched. Human minds were chaotic, painful to read. And there was another human. Had seen her before in the corridors. She never acknowledged him. She dressed in the style of the merchant clans, not Earth fashion. She spoke with an accent from the colony worlds. She had grown up among aliens, far from Earth, and she wanted nothing to do with her own species. The team met for the first time in a small conference room. 4 chairs were arranged in a circle. When entered, the others were already seated. The only empty chair was in the center, separated from the rest. He sat down without comment. His compound eyes studied him. You are the Earth human. Yes. I have read about your species. You are persistence predators. You hunt by exhausting your prey over long distances. That is our evolutionary history, yes. Interesting. His voice held no warmth. I will be monitoring your behavior during this simulation. Said nothing. The massive herbivore was pressed against his chair, trying to make himself smaller. His huge eyes kept darting to, then away, then back. Kel rubbed his temples. Please, the telepath said. Your mind is very loud. Can you try to think more quietly? I do not know how to do that, said honestly. Crossed her arms. She did not look at him. Let us be clear. I am not here to represent humanity. I am here to represent myself. Do not expect any special treatment because we share a species. Nodded, I expect nothing. The room fell silent. Outside the window, stars burned in the eternal darkness. Somewhere far away, Earth continued to turn, blue and green, and completely unaware that one of its children was sitting in a room full of strangers who saw him as a monster. The simulation would begin tomorrow. Did not know what waited for them in the isolation chamber, but he knew one thing for certain. He would not become what they expected him to be. Professor Gent had no body in the normal sense. He was a pattern of light, a living equation, a being from a species that had abandoned physical form 1,000,000 years ago. When he spoke, his voice came from everywhere and nowhere. You will be tested, he announced to the gathered students. Not on knowledge, not on skill, on something more fundamental. Team 7 stood in a line with the other teams, kept his eyes forward. He could feel trembling beside him. The massive herbivore's fear was so strong that even could sense it. The isolation chamber simulates hostile environments, Gent continued. You will face hunger, danger, and difficult choices. Many students fail. Some are removed for psychological damage. This is expected. This is the purpose. Kel leaned close to. The telepath's voice was a whisper. He enjoys this. I can feel it. He has no emotions, but something in him finds satisfaction in watching others break. Said nothing. He had already guessed this about Gent. The teams were led to separate chambers. Each chamber contained a transport pad that would beam them into the simulation. The technology was impressive. The simulation would feel completely real. Pain would feel like pain. Hunger would feel like hunger. Only death was simulated, automatically removing anyone who died from the program. Team 7 stepped onto their transport pad. Light surrounded them. When opened his eyes, he was standing on a rocky hillside beneath an orange sky. The air was thin and cold. Strange plants with black leaves grew between the stones. In the distance, mountains rose like broken teeth. "Begin survival protocol," said immediately. Her compound eyes scanned the environment. "We need water, shelter, and food, in that order." Was hyperventilating. His massive chest heaved up and down. "I smell predators," he gasped. "This planet has predators." Pulled out a device from her pocket. It was the only tool they had been given. "Scanner shows a water source 3 kilometers north, possible cave systems near the mountains." Kel pointed at the sky. "The sun is setting. We have perhaps 2 hours of light remaining." They began to walk, stayed at the back of the group. He watched the shadows. He listened for sounds. His instincts were alive in ways they had not been since leaving Earth. The attack came on the 2nd hour. Something burst from the rocks. It was fast and dark, with too many legs and jaws that dripped with poison. A simulated predator designed to test their response. Screamed. The sound was terrible, a prey animal's death cry. He turned and ran, his massive body crashing through the strange plants. Calculated instantly. "Leave him. The predator will focus on the fleeing target. We can escape while it is distracted." "No," said. He was already running, not away from the predator but toward. The massive herbivore had tripped and fallen. He was lying on the ground, frozen in terror, his eyes empty. The predator was closing in. Threw himself between them. He had no weapon, he had no plan. He only had his body and his voice. He screamed at the creature, spreading his arms wide, making himself look larger. He stamped his feet on the ground. He bared his teeth. The predator hesitated. It had not expected this. Prey ran, prey did not challenge. Grabbed a stone from the ground and threw it. The stone hit the creature's face. It shrieked and pulled back. "Get up," said Tu. His voice was calm despite his racing heart. "Get up, we need to move." Could not move. His body had shut down. Terror had locked his muscles. Bent down. He grabbed his arm and pulled it over his shoulder. The herbivore weighed 5 times what weighed. It did not matter. Began to walk. His legs burned. His back screamed. Sweat poured down his face. But he kept walking, dragging the frozen herbivore with him, step by step, toward where the others waited. 6 kilometers. He walked 6 kilometers carrying on his back. When they finally reached the cave the others had found, his legs gave out. He collapsed on the stone floor, gasping for air. His muscles were torn. His body was broken, but was alive. Stood over him. Her compound eyes showed nothing. That was illogical. You damaged yourself to save a team member who contributed nothing. The efficient choice was to sacrifice him. "I did not ask for efficiency," said between breaths. "I asked for his life." 3 days passed. They survived barely. Food was scarce. Water was limited. The environment shifted constantly, as if the simulation was adapting to make things harder. On the 3rd day, Kel pulled aside. "I sensed something," the telepath said. His blue skin had gone pale. "From thoughts about sabotage, about betraying the team." Studied the telepath. "What exactly did you sense?" "Fragments, images, plans to steal supplies, thoughts about letting others die." "Could the simulation be affecting what you receive?" Kel froze. "What do you mean?" "This is a test," said slowly. "Professor Gent wants to break us. What if part of that is manipulating what you sense, making you believe things that are not true?" The telepath's eyes widened. He had not considered this. That evening, Kel confronted in front of the group. He accused her of planning betrayal. Exploded in anger. She called Kel a liar. She said he was the one who could not be trusted, the one reading everyone's private thoughts. The team fractured. to a corner, refusing to participate in emotional conflict, curled into a ball, overwhelmed by the screaming. And Kel stood on opposite sides of the cave, hatred burning in their eyes. Sat in the middle and said nothing. He waited for the storm to pass. On the 5th day, the food ran out completely. That night a terminal appeared in the center of the cave. It glowed with soft light. Text appeared on its screen. Survival Protocol 17. Each team member may vote to eliminate one other member. The member with the most votes will be removed from the simulation. The remaining members will receive full rations for the final 2 days. VOTING is anonymous. No one will know who voted for whom. Stared at the screen. So this was the real test, not survival, not cooperation. This was about betrayal, about seeing who would sacrifice others to save themselves. The terminal divided into 5 smaller screens, one floating in front of each team member. Each screen showed the names of all 5. Each screen waited for a selection. Watch the others. Voted immediately. Her decision took less than a second. Logic was fast. Kel hesitated, then voted. His hand was shaking. Stared at her screen for a long moment. Her jaw was tight. Then she pressed a name. Was crying. The massive herbivore's body shook with silent sobs, but eventually he pressed a name too. Everyone looked at. His screen glowed in front of him. 5 names, 5 choices. 1 tap and someone would be removed. 1 tap and he would have food for the remaining days. Looked at the screen. Then he stood up. I am not voting, he said. His voice was clear and calm. And I think we need to talk about what we just did. The cave fell silent. The terminal flickered, confused. This was not supposed to happen. Someone had refused to play the game. Far above the simulation, in a dark room filled with floating screens, Professor Gent observed. The pattern of light that formed his consciousness flickered with something that might have been surprise. 12 Academy Council members sat around him. They represented the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. They had approved this experiment. They wanted to see what happened when different species were forced to choose between self-interest and cooperation. The data had been clear for decades. When resources became scarce, every species chose self-interest, every single one. Mantids sacrificed the weak. Herbivores stampeded and crushed their own children. Telepaths invaded minds to gain advantage. This was the nature of intelligent life. Survival first, always. The experiment was designed to prove this truth, to show young students that cooperation was an illusion, that when things became difficult, everyone would betray everyone else. But now a human was standing in the middle of a starving team, refusing to vote. This is unexpected, said one of the council members. It is a single data point, Gent replied, not significant. But on the screen something was happening. The human was talking to his team, and they were listening. Inside the simulation, sat cross-legged on the cold cave floor. The voting terminal still floated beside him, waiting for his choice. He ignored it. I want to know, he said quietly. I want to know who everyone voted for. Silence. Why? Asked. Her voice was flat. The votes were anonymous. That was the rule. We do not have to reveal anything. You are right. You do not have to, but I am asking anyway. More silence, then surprisingly spoke first. I voted for, she said it without shame, without hesitation. He requires the most resources. He has contributed the least. If we are to survive, removing him is the logical choice. Made a sound like a wounded animal. He had known. Somewhere inside he had known. But hearing it spoken aloud was different. Hearing it made it real. Anyone else? Asked. Kel was shaking. The telepath's blue skin had turned gray. I voted for. I still believe she was planning to betray us. I was afraid. I am sorry. Laughed. It was not a happy sound. Of course you did. Because you cannot tell the difference between a real thought and a simulated one. Some telepath you are." "Who did you vote for?" asked her. Laughter died. She looked at the ground. A long moment passed before she spoke. "I voted for you." Nodded. He did not seem surprised. "Why?" "Because I hate you." The words came out like poison. "I hate everything you represent. I spent my whole life trying to be different from Earth humans, trying to prove that I was civilized, that I was not a predator. And then you come here and you carry on your back and you protect everyone and you refuse to play their stupid game. You make humanity look good, and that makes my whole life feel like a lie." The cave was very quiet. Was crying now. She had not cried in years. She had trained herself not to cry because crying was a sign of weakness and she could never be weak. "I grew up on a colony world," she continued. "The only human among thousands of aliens. They bullied me. They called me predator. They said I would snap one day and kill them all. I was 7 years old, 7, and I believed them. I believed I was a monster." She looked at with wet eyes. "So I tried to be different. I rejected Earth. I rejected my own parents. I made myself empty, and it worked. They stopped being afraid of me because I was not really human anymore. I was nothing." Moved closer to her. He did not touch her. He just sat nearby, close enough that she could feel his presence. "You are not nothing," he said softly. "How would you know?" "Because nothing would not feel this much pain." Was still curled in a ball, but he was listening. Slowly, his huge body began to uncurl. "You carried me," he said too. His voice was small for such a large creature. "When said to leave me behind, you carried me. I have never understood why. You would have died. The simulation might have saved me. You did not know. I did not care about the simulation. I cared about you." Blinked his massive eyes. In all his life, no one had ever said those words to him. His species was prey. They expected to be sacrificed. They expected to be left behind. It was the natural order of things. But this human had broken the natural order. Had been silent throughout this exchange. Now she spoke. "I do not understand what is happening. These emotional displays serve no survival purpose. We are still starving. We still have only 2 days remaining. We still need to vote." "No," said, "we do not. The simulation requires it. The simulation can wait." His compound eyes flickered. "You are refusing the rules of the test." "Yes." "Why?" Looked at each of them in turn. Cold and logical, broken and afraid, Kel ashamed of his own weakness, hollow and lost. "Because the test wants us to break," he said. "It wants us to turn on each other. It wants to prove that when things get hard, we are all just animals fighting for survival. But we are more than that. We can be more than that, if we choose to be." "Choice is an illusion," said. "Biology determines behavior. You are a predator. I am a mantid, is prey. We cannot change what we are." "My grandmother survived 3 wars," said. "She watched her village burn. She buried her parents in a field because there was no one left to dig proper graves. By your logic, she should have become hard and cruel. She should have learned that survival is the only thing that matters." He paused. "Instead, she planted a garden. She grows roses. She says that beauty is the only rebellion against ugliness. She says that kindness is the only victory against cruelty." Kel was staring at him. The telepath's eyes were wide. "I can hear it," he whispered. "Your mind. It is still chaotic, but underneath there is something solid, something that does not change. You really believe this. You really believe that people can choose to be better." "Yes." "Even after everything said. Even after she voted to remove you." Looked at, the other human was still crying, but she was listening now. Really listening. "Especially after that," he said. "Was hurt. She made a choice from that hurt, but hurt can heal. People can change. That is the whole point." The cave fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not cold, not hostile. Something had shifted in the air. slowly stood up, his massive body uncurled to its full height. For the first time since the simulation began, he did not look afraid. "I do not want to vote," he said. "I want to stay with all of you." His compound eyes studied him. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. "Inefficient," she said, "but perhaps acceptable." Kel closed his eyes. The telepath reached out with his mind, not to read thoughts but simply to connect, to feel the presence of others without judgment. And still crying, moved to sit beside, she did not speak. She did not have to, her presence said enough. In the observation room, Professor Gent noted the readings. Team cohesion metrics were rising. Trust levels were increasing. The experiment was designed to shatter them. Instead, they were coming together. The pattern of light that was Gent flickered again. This was not supposed to happen. This was outside all models. This was impossible. But there it was on every screen. A human, sitting in the dark, surrounded by strangers who had become something more. The Academy Council had observed thousands of experiments. They had watched students from every species face impossible choices. They had recorded the data, analyzed the patterns, and drawn their conclusions. All intelligent life was selfish. All cooperation was temporary. When resources ran out, bonds broke. This was not cruelty. This was simply truth. But tonight, the truth was falling apart. Professor Gent floated in the center of the observation room. His light form pulsed with irregular patterns that his species called thought. Around him, the 12 council members watched the screens showing Team 7. "The experiment has been compromised," Gent announced. "The human variable is producing outcomes we cannot model. I recommend immediate termination of this simulation." An ancient voice spoke from the shadows. "Wait." Everyone turned. In the darkest corner of the room sat a being that was older than most civilizations. The witness had no true form. It was a collection of memories, a living archive, a creature that had observed the rise and fall of empires for longer than anyone could remember. The witness rarely spoke. When it did, others listened. "What are you seeing, Gent?" the ancient being asked. "Describe it precisely." Gent's light flickered through several colors. The human refused to vote in the elimination protocol. This created an unexpected social dynamic. Instead of fragmenting, the team began to communicate. Trust metrics are now higher than at any point in the simulation. And this troubles you. It defies the model. The model states that resource scarcity leads to competition. Competition leads to betrayal. This has been consistent across 4,287 trials. The human is an anomaly. The witness made a sound that might have been laughter. An anomaly? Yes. Tell me, Gent, what do you know about human history? I have studied the relevant files. Humans are a young species. Aggressive, territorial. They have fought wars among themselves for their entire existence. They nearly destroyed their own planet before achieving space travel. All true, what else? Gent paused. I do not understand the question. In all your studies, did you learn why humans wage war? Resources, territory, power, the standard motivations. And did you learn what happens after their wars end? Gent's light dimmed slightly. He was searching his memory banks. The survivors rebuild. They create new governments. They establish trade agreements. They forgive, the witness said. That is the word you are missing. Humans forgive. They fight brutal, terrible wars, and then they forgive the beings who killed their families. They shake hands with enemies. They build monuments together. They marry each other's children. The council members shifted uncomfortably. This was not the direction they had expected the conversation to take. What is your point? Gent asked. My point is that your model is incomplete. You understand conflict. You do not understand what comes after conflict. Humans are not dangerous because they are predators. They are dangerous because they can choose not to be. And when they make that choice, they change everyone around them. The witness gestured toward the screens. Look at Team 7. A mantid who has never valued another life is now protecting her teammates. A prey species creature who was born afraid is standing tall for the first time. A telepath who could not trust his own mind is learning to trust others. A human who rejected her heritage is reconnecting with it. These are individual responses, not statistically significant. No, the witness agreed, but they are contagious. Inside the simulation, time had stopped. Team 7 did not understand what was happening. One moment, the hostile environment was continuing around them. The wind was blowing. Strange sounds echoed in the distance. The next moment, everything froze. The wind stopped mid-gust. A flying creature hung motionless in the air. Even the dust particles suspended in front of them refused to move. "What is this?" asked. Her compound eyes scanned everywhere at once. "A malfunction." "I cannot sense anything," Kel said. The telepath's face was strained. "The simulation feels empty, like a held breath." Looked around at the frozen world. "I think they stopped the test." "Why would they do that?" asked. "I do not know, but we have time now, time to talk." And so they talked. Went first. She had never discussed her past with anyone. The Mantid Collective did not value personal history. Individuals were replaceable. Emotions were inefficient. But now, in this frozen moment, she found herself speaking. "I had a brood sister," said. "When I was young, she was weaker than me, smaller. Our collective determined that she was not worth the resources required to raise her. They instructed me to eliminate her. This is normal practice for mantids. The strong survive. The weak are removed." She paused. Her compound eyes seemed to dim slightly. "I refused. I do not know why. It was illogical, but I refused. They eliminated her anyway, and they marked me as defective. That is why I am here at the academy. I was sent away because I showed weakness." Moved closer to her. His massive body cast a shadow over the, "You are not weak. What you did was brave." "It was foolish. She died anyway." "But you tried." His voice was stronger now. "That is what keeps saying, the trying is what matters." Kel shared next. He talked about growing up as a telepath, never knowing which thoughts were his own and which belonged to others. He talked about the loneliness of hearing everyone's secrets and knowing that no one would ever trust him completely. "I am always afraid," he admitted. "Afraid that I will hear something I should not. Afraid that I will accidentally reveal something private. Afraid that people only pretend to like me because they know I can read their minds." Laughed softly. "At least you have an excuse. I pushed everyone away on purpose." "Why?" "Because if I pushed them away first, they could not hurt me." She looked at. "Survival strategy, right? That is what everyone does. Protect yourself before someone else can damage you." "That is what I used to believe," said quietly. "What changed your mind?" He thought about his grandmother. He thought about the garden she tended, the roses she grew in soil that had once been soaked with blood. He thought about her smile, the way her eyes crinkled, the warmth in her voice when she spoke about hope. "Someone loved me without asking for anything in return," he said. "My grandmother. She had every reason to become bitter. She lost everything in the wars, her family, her home, her country. But she chose kindness instead. She chose to believe that people could be better." "And you believed her?" "Not at first. I was angry when I was young. Angry at the world, angry at the people who killed my parents, angry at everything. But she was patient. She kept showing me kindness day after day, year after year, until I understood." "Understood what?" Looked at each of them. The cold mantid who had once refused to kill her sister, the fearful giant who was slowly finding courage. Kel, the lonely telepath who desperately wanted to trust. The lost human who was beginning to find her way home. "That kindness is not weakness," he said. "It is the hardest choice there is. Anyone can be cruel. Anyone can betray. Anyone can choose themselves over others, but kindness requires strength. It requires believing in people even when they give you no reason to. It requires trying again and again, even when you fail. The frozen world around them seemed to shimmer. Something was happening. The simulation was changing. "I think they are going to restart the test," said. Nodded, "Then we should be ready." "For what?" He smiled. It was a human smile with teeth showing, the kind that used to make the others uncomfortable. But now, somehow, it did not seem threatening. It seemed warm. "For whatever comes next," he said, "together." In the observation room, the witness turned to Professor Gent. "Resume the experiment," the ancient being commanded. "But modify the parameters. I want to see what they do when they are given a chance to help others, not just themselves." Gent's light pulsed with uncertainty. "That is not the standard protocol." "No, it is not. Do it anyway." The simulation resumed. And Team 7 discovered that their test was not over. It was only beginning. The simulation changed. The hostile environment disappeared. The orange sky faded. The rocky hillside melted away like a dream. In its place came something new. Team 7 found themselves standing on a flat plain under a gray sky. In the distance, smoke rose from a crashed vessel. Warning lights blinked in the darkness. The sound of distress signals filled the air. A message appeared in front of them, floating in glowing letters. "Rescue protocol initiated. Team 12 is stranded in the crash zone. INJURIES reported. Environmental HAZARDSDETECTED. Your team may attempt rescue. Success is not guaranteed. Failure will result in your elimination from the simulation. The efficient choice is to avoid the crash zone and proceed to the extraction point. Your team has been LOCATED. Rescue SHUTTLES are waiting." "Choose." Read the message twice. Her compound eyes flickered through calculations. "This is illogical. We have already survived the main trial. We have proven ourselves. Going to the crash zone risks everything we have achieved." "Team 12 is dying," Kel said quietly. The telepath's eyes were closed. "I can feel them. 4 minds growing weaker. One of them is terrified. Another is in tremendous pain." Shuddered. "I know what that feels like, being trapped, waiting for help that never comes." Looked at, she knew what he was going to do. She had known since the message appeared. "You are going to try, are you not?" she asked. Was already walking toward the smoke. Made a sound of frustration. "This is exactly what I was warned about. Humans make emotional decisions that endanger logical outcomes. The efficient choice is clear. We should proceed to extraction." "Then go," said without stopping. "I will not force anyone to come with me." He kept walking. Behind him he heard silence, then footsteps. Was following him. The massive herbivore moved with surprising grace, his heavy feet striking the ground in a steady rhythm. Then Kel. The telepath jogged to catch up, his blue skin flushed with exertion. Then she fell into step beside, her jaw set with determination. Remained behind for a long moment. Her compound eyes watched them go. Every calculation told her this was wrong. Every model predicted failure. Every instinct screamed to choose safety. But something else spoke too, something quieter, a memory of a brute sister she had tried to save long ago. Began to run. The crash zone was worse than the warning suggested. The vessel had split open on impact. Toxic gases leaked from ruptured fuel cells. Debris was scattered across a wide area. The surviving members of Team 12 were trapped inside the wreckage, pinned by collapsed supports. "We need to move fast," said. "Kel, can you communicate with them telepathically?" "Yes, they are weak, but I can reach them." "Tell them help is coming. Tell them to stay calm." Was already moving toward the largest piece of debris. His massive hands gripped the twisted metal, his muscles strained. With a groan of effort, he began to lift. "I cannot hold this for long," he gasped. "Someone needs to get them out." Dropped to her knees and crawled into the gap had created. Inside the wreckage, she could see the trapped students, 2 amphibians, a crystalline being like Vel, a 4-winged flyer with broken wings. "I see them. They are alive but injured." "Get the smallest one first," ordered. The mantid had taken position beside, adding her own strength to hold the debris. "Then the flyer, the crystal being, will be heaviest." Worked quickly. She pulled the first amphibian free and passed them to who carried them to safety. Then the second. Then the flyer, carefully supporting the broken wings. The crystal being was trapped under a massive beam. Even with and holding the main debris, the beam would not move. "I cannot reach them," said. "The beam is too heavy." Looked at the structure. He looked at straining muscles. He looked at the crystal being's fading glow. Then he walked into the wreckage. "What are you doing?" Kel shouted. "Getting them out." He positioned himself under the beam, his back pressed against the metal, his legs braced against the ground. He pushed. Human beings are not the strongest species in the galaxy. They are not the fastest. They are not the toughest. But they have one ability that terrifies everyone who understands it. They do not stop. Pushed, his muscles screamed, his bones groaned, blood vessels burst in his eyes, turning them red, but he did not stop. The beam lifted, 1 centimeter, 2, 3. "Now," he gasped, "get them out now." Grabbed the crystal being and pulled. The being slid free just as strength finally gave out. The beam crashed down, missing him by inches. He collapsed on the ground, gasping for air. His body was ruined. He could not feel his legs. His arms hung useless at his sides, but he was smiling. Team 12 was safe. The simulation ended. White lights surrounded them all, and then they were standing in the Academy's medical bay. Automated systems scanned them and began treating their injuries. The damage from the simulation was real, but the Academy had advanced healing technology. Professor Ginn appeared before them. The pattern of light seemed different now, less cold, almost curious. "Team 7, he said, "you have completed the experiment." "Did we pass?" asked. "There is no pass or fail. There is only data." Gent paused. "However, the Council has noted your performance, specifically the performance of the human-designated park." Tried to sit up, but his body refused. He lay on the medical bed looking at the ceiling. "What about it?" "You introduced an unexpected variable into the experiment. Your refusal to vote in the elimination protocol. Your decision to rescue Team 12. Your willingness to damage yourself for others. These behaviors do not match any predictive model we have developed." "Humans are like that," said softly. "They do not match models." Gent turned to the herbivore. "You have changed as well. At the start of this experiment, you could not stand in the same room as a predator species. Now you call one a friend." "Looked at, he carried me. When I could not walk, he carried me. How could I not trust someone who did that?" "Trust is a statistical weakness. It opens you to exploitation." "Maybe," agreed, "but it also opens you to things that cannot be measured: friendship, loyalty, love." Gent was silent for a long moment. Then the pattern of light flickered in a way that might have been acceptance. "I will record this in my findings," the professor said. "Perhaps our models require adjustment." The Academy graduation ceremony took place 3 years later. Team 7 stood together on the stage, receiving their certificates as the first fully mixed species crew certified for deep space exploration. In the audience, representatives from dozens of species watched, some with curiosity, some with fear, some with something that looked almost like hope. When it was time for speeches, the Academy asked Team 7 to speak. They chose. The massive herbivore walked to the podium. He looked out at the crowd, at the hundreds of faces staring up at him. 3 years ago, this would have paralyzed him with fear. Today, he felt only gratitude. Before I came to this academy, he said, I was afraid of everything. My species evolved to fear. We run from danger. We hide from predators. We expect to be sacrificed when resources run low. This is what we know. This is what we are. He paused, then I met a human. The crowd stirred. Humans were still feared throughout the galaxy. Their reputation had not changed. His name is Park. When I fell during our first test, he carried me. When I was too heavy to lift, he lifted me anyway. When I was voted out by my own teammates, he refused to accept it. He taught me something that I had never understood before. Looked at who was sitting with the rest of Team 7. The human smiled at him, teeth showing in the human way. He taught me that fear is a choice, said, and that we can choose differently. The audience was silent. On every face something was shifting. Something old and heavy was starting to move. Humans are predators, this is true. They evolved to hunt. They have forward-facing eyes and endurance that never ends. They can be violent. They can be cruel. Their history is written in blood. His voice grew stronger, but they also choose kindness. They choose to carry those who cannot walk. They choose to save strangers instead of themselves. They choose to trust when trust has not been earned. And when they make these choices, something strange happens. He spread his arms wide, encompassing his teammates, the academy, the whole galaxy. They make us want to choose differently too. The ceremony ended. Team 7 gathered for one last photograph before departing on their mission. A deep space exploration vessel waited for them in orbit, stocked with supplies for a 5-year journey into unknown territory. It would be dangerous. There would be moments when trust would be tested. There would be moments when fear would return, but they would face those moments together. As they walked toward the transport shuttle, fell into step beside. I never said thank you, she said quietly, for everything, for not giving up on me. Shrugged, you never needed me to give up on you. You just needed time to remember who you were. And who am I? He smiled, a human, the good kind. Laughed. It was a real laugh, warm and free, the kind she had forgotten she could make. She reached out and took his hand. Together, Team 7 boarded the shuttle and flew toward the stars. Behind them, the academy faded into the distance. Ahead of them, the universe waited, vast and unknown and full of possibilities. And somewhere on Earth, in a small garden surrounded by roses, an old woman named Park looked up at the night sky. She could not see her grandson. He was too far away for sight, but she knew he was out there, somewhere among the stars. She smiled and whispered into the darkness. You did well. The galaxy would remember this moment for a long time, not as the day a human broke an experiment, but as the day an experiment broke something else. The fear.